Welcome everyone to another episode of TheoTech Podcast. Actually, I am now officially going to call these sections TheoBlitz. Do you like that name, Chris?
It's fine by me. We
Okay.
should try it, see what our audience thinks.
All right. Do you guys like the name TheoBlitz? If so, let us know. If not, let us know. Either way. So again, we're back at it with another Blitz rounds. Again, these are little short 10 to 15 minute topics where we just sit down and talk about things that are on our mind. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm all right. I've been programming a lot lately, which is a very different activity than communicating with people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's no surprise on one hand, but aren't you programming in different languages? I'm just kidding.
Yes, literally.
You're using languages,
Yeah.
which is an interesting word to use.
Yeah, I think it's
describing-
interesting because when you program, you're communicating with a machine
Yeah.
versus when you're talking to people. And I find that my brain has to switch modes, actually, between the two. So I can write maybe a nice article or something like that for human beings to read, and then I have to go back to code, and it's like, okay, I have to restructure the way that I'm thinking about this. And yeah.
Isn't that true though for different human beings though? Like you talk differently between like a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old. Like your language,
I think
your
that's
communication is different.
It's
right?
definitely true, but there's something fundamental in the difference between trying to get a computer to do what you want it to do and trying to communicate with a human being.
That's true.
I think there's a difference between natural and formal languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So computers are very fast and very dumb. Is that correct?
I guess you could say that. They don't
very-
handle ambiguity.
Yeah. Very
That's
fast.
what
and
it
very
is.
dumb. There's no tolerance when it comes to incorrectness. Versus human brain is really amazing because like we will text and write things incorrectly, and the people on the other end will receive that and understand.
Yeah. It's
Most of the times.
It's,
Like
and it's
90%.
also incredible because we're learning,
Yeah.
right? And we're interpreting all the time.
Yeah.
I think that there are some interesting advancements in neural networks. Like that's what they're using to do image recognition, speech recognition, and those kinds of things. Deep learning, deep neural nets, and that's pretty fascinating because it's the performance, the accuracy in recognizing objects and images has just shot up so much with those, with this algorithm
Yeah.
that's come up in recent days.
Do you get frustrated when you code?
I do, but that's usually when things aren't working the way I want them to. The other feeling is feeling overwhelmed, where you know what you need to do and it's just a lot of work, and you're trying to keep it all in your head so that you can translate that into code and put all the pieces together. So it's almost like coding. For me, coding has a lot of intellectual scaffolding. What I mean by that is that you have this grand idea of what it needs to be in the ultimate experience, but obviously it's not as simple as like, oh, I'm going to make a movie that's going to play back and view the experience I want, or like I'm just going to tell a human being about what it should do.
Yeah,
like
because
you
there's
gotta,
a lot of different components and
that's the thing that's beautiful and also hard about programming. You can't just be a visionary. You have to dive all the way deep and tell the computer what it needs to do
exactly
everywhere, all the
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
And really, that's the power of programming languages. If you want to know what programming languages is about, I would say that they're about managing intellectual complexity. That's what it is.
Okay.
According to one of the seminal books called The Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, it came out of MIT, and it was their kind of starting computer science textbook for many years, as I understand it. But that book really summarized the field of programming languages so well. That's what it said. Programming languages are about managing intellectual complexity.
Managing intellectual complexity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good way to put it, actually.
Yeah, I was like, my mind was blown when I read that. I already knew how to program before I read that book, but when I read it, I was like, wow, this has just made sense out of the entire field for me. And now I don't feel scared now of picking up new programming languages because now I know what they're for.
Okay.
Now I know what they're about, and we can experiment and play with them and see what they're good at, what they're not good at, and just try it out. So that was a really helpful insight from that book.
Yeah, that's why new languages are birthed kind of like periodically too, and they're like more and more rapidly. Like new languages are coming out. Like I don't know what that newest one was, like Swift or
Yeah,
Schema?
Swift is from Apple
Yeah.
to run on iOS, and it looks pretty nice. It's a scripting language, but it's well designed, like from the ground up. And I haven't really played with it that much, but I did walk through the tutorial and I liked it.
Okay. I definitely feel the same way with you too. Frustrated and overwhelmed sometimes. I think like with overwhelmed or the feeling of overwhelmed, like one way I deal with it is to shrink down the magnitude or the scale of my problem to the point where it does feel manageable, and then I'll tackle it.
Yep.
Is that what you do too? I think
Yeah, that's kind of, I think, partly what managing intellectual complexity is about. It's about restructuring your thoughts and your ideas so that you can actually deal with them bit by bit, piece by piece, and build up on what you're doing so that, once you've implemented this one capability or object, you don't have to think about the details anymore, right? It's abstracted away. You can build and depend on your abstraction and build bigger things on top of that. So that's definitely how, as a developer, you end up thinking, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, as a really good developer, you've already built up such a great repertoire, and you already know all the libraries you need to use. You already know how to use them, and you already have all the tooling, and a lot of the complexity of the build process and deployment and those kinds of things are taken care of. And then you can think more maybe on the architectural level where there's some new challenges and problems to solve. And once you've made the right decisions there, set them in place, then you and your team can be implementing all the details. And, there's definitely this back and forth between the high level big picture and ultimate experience you want to deliver, as well as the nitty gritty details of like, okay, we have to build this capability now. And it's kind of, it takes judgment to manage those. And when do you work on what?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how you can overcome overwhelmed or the feeling overwhelmed. But I'll be honest, I get frustrated frequently when I'm programming.
Oh yeah.
I don't know like if there's good ways to deal with frustration, but
What are you frustrated by?
sometimes frustrated over just like when things aren't working, or this this happens when I'm coding with people. Either people don't deliver on time, or people deliver the wrong thing, or there's like miscommunication. That's I think the worst. But yeah, just I think sometimes you feel like the amount of time and effort that you put into something, like you kind of expect that same amount of payoff, right? And I think it's the worst when that payoff doesn't happen.
Yeah. Totally.
So
Yeah, I've spent probably 3 days worth of work trying to solve some problem, and then at the end had to just throw it all away because that approach was just wrong.
Yeah.
Had to try again from a different
And I mean,
approach.
it's not like you're, losing like $1 billion. Like, it's different from like civil engineering where if you build a building or you build a bridge and you do it wrong initially,
Oh, yeah.
like, you're not only wasting time, but wasting like millions and billions of dollars. So
Yes.
that's the good thing about CS, but still it really sucks when it's like, I took a different approach and it was the wrong one, and now I have to like delete a day's worth of work, or not delete, but like basically scrap a day's worth. Of work.
Yep.
So,
The futility of it.
yeah.
Yep. I feel ya.
And I think that's where maturity and experience comes in.
Yeah, and even the most mature developers, I'm sure, experience that frustration.
Yeah.
And some of it's just a part of learning something new and solving a challenging problem. And but this is interesting. What came to my mind was actually just the story in the garden, Adam and Eve, where after Adam sinned, God cursed the ground and said that it was by the sweat of his brow that it would yield its food for him, and that when he would try to plant, he would get thorns instead, and that kind of thing. And in some ways, I think that the intellectual frustration or the intellectual thorniness that we encounter when we're programming, and the futility where we feel like we put in so much and it like yielded so little, is just kind of an echo of that curse of sin. And that in some ways the joy of God's kingdom will one day be that we have this incredible intellectual freedom where the vision and ideas that we have can be translated into reality so beautifully and perfectly, that it's just full of wonder and joy. So, everybody, as programmers, we get foretastes of that when we have those epiphanies and things are just like, what, this actually worked. It all came together, and this is beautiful actually.
Yeah.
And those foretastes, I think, are foretastes of really God's kingdom. So, that's just something that tied in with, it just came to my mind as we were talking about the futility and frustration of programming.
I wonder if we have a mental cap, though, and that it'll be lifted off when we go to
I'm sure that
heaven.
it'll be an order of magnitude different than.
Oh, that's so weird.
anything
I
that we're
wonder.
experiencing
Oh
right now.
man, I don't know if you've seen that movie Limitless, but like I just thought about that when you were talking about the thorn in our minds.
I haven't seen that movie.
Oh, okay. It's the basic synopsis is like this guy takes like a miracle pill and it like unlocks his brain's capacity. So like we humans only use like 10% of our brain.
Uh-huh.
So like it's like what happens if you use 100. So like
Okay.
goes from like this broke writer to like a millionaire, and there's obviously repercussions of taking this pill, but like anyways, Bradley Cooper, we love
Okay.
you.